The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Podcast with Alistair McLeod, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello, this is Alistair McLeod, and with me on the line from Germany is Professor Markus Kerber, who is Professor at TU Berlin. Welcome, Professor Kerber.
Hello.
Hello. Looking at the, if you like, constitutional problem in Germany over the eurozone, from Britain, it looks a little bit confusing. I wondered if you could just bring our listeners up to date with the exact state of play.
I fully understand that for a foreigner with a tradition of parliamentary democracy and parliamentary sovereignty, the German situation looks a little bit confusing. Let me try to explain. After the war in the light of the 12 dark years of German history, the German politicians said, well, we have to defend democracy against the politicians. And the democratic principle as such is an unalienable part of the German constitution. And as such, or part of it, fiscal and budgetary policy is the hardcore of democracy, which is not at the disposal of any changes. Any law or any transfer of powers has to be in line with that benchmark of the German constitution. And the Verfassungsgericht, the Constitutional Court, is the guardian of the German constitution. The individuals in Germany, or the citizens in contrast to Europe, have a right to protest against offences of that democratic principle. It is a subjective right. So inasmuch as Germany transfers powers to an international organization, in this case to the European Community or to the so-called European Stability Mechanism, the citizens may protest and say and may argue, and this is what they do and this is what I do. Not only this costs a lot of money and Germany will be exposed to an enormous loss of money, but finally there will be an enormous financial burden, and that financial burden will squeeze out, factually at least, the democratic right of participation in the democratic debate on democracy. So the Constitutional Court has made two prerequisites. First of all, that for any bailout and for any transfer of powers, the German parliament in a qualified way must be heard. They have to give their consent. And secondly, that whatever transfer takes place, it must not lead to an unsustainable burden for public finance in Germany.
Right. That I think that's quite clear. It seems to me that this goes back to the Growth and Stability Pact, which, if I think I've got this right, said that no country can run a budget deficit of more than 3% or a level of government debt in excess of 60% of GDP. Yet, virtually all the governments concerned, well, certainly all the governments that are looking for bailouts are well in excess of those two provisions. But putting that provision into a treaty, I would have thought means that there is only one way that the Constitutional Court can really rule on this, because the bailouts they must be against the treaty, the provisions of the treaty, or have I got that wrong?
Well, no, I'm fully right, and I cannot consent more that the bailouts are a violation of the letter and the spirit of Article 125, which says that there is an interdiction of bailouts, or the so-called no bailout clause, that every country is liable for its own sovereign debts. And what is more important than the letter is the spirit. No bilateral agreement may alter or change or even modify that no bailout clause, because the no bailout clause has tried to be, that was the prerequisite of German consent, of Dutch consent, of Finnish consent to the European Monetary Union, by saying whatever happens, there will not be a bailout. Every country remains exposed to market discipline, which apparently is no longer the case. So far you've got things completely right. As far as the Stability and Growth Pact is concerned, this has now been perpetuated into what they call a fiscal compact, which has modified the Growth and Stability Pact insofar as that, contrary to the Stability and Growth Pact and to Article 126 of the European Treaty, the European Court of Justice may be an actor, a player in that field, and may not only examine but even impose sanctions on a country. May even impose balance sanctions on a state, the fiscal behavior of which is unbalanced. This is an innovation. That treaty is a normal international treaty consented by 25 out of 27 members of the European Union. It's not a modification of the treaty, and this is why we have so great legal problems with that. In substance, that changes the relationship between national fiscal democracy and Brussels. And Brussels will have many more rights to intervene, to prevent, and why take a case to the court, which Brussels so far, the Commission was so far, or any member state was so far not allowed to do. So in the Constitutional Court in Germany and in the legal discussion, we have two components for the time being: the European Stability Mechanism, which is some sort of bailout fund, an umbrella, a firewall, institutionalized, perpetual, and totally, in opposite to the clause you mentioned, the no bailout clause, suspending permanently that bailout clause. That will be judged not only by the German Constitutional Court, but as well by the European Court of Justice, because a very courageous Labour MP of Ireland, Mr. Thomas Pringle, has brought it before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has asked the European Court of Justice, in the framework of a procedure for a preliminary judgment, to rule on whether any member state is entitled to ratify the EMS, due to the fact that it's quite obviously a violation of the bailout clause.
Right. So which order is this going to go? Because I would have thought that there's some sense, perhaps, in the European Court of Justice, considering this case ahead of the constitutional.
Well, very logic, but logic is not always, let's say, the steering committee or the steering function, the ordering function of law. As a matter of fact, the Constitutional Court, the National Constitutional Court, and the Court of Justice, the European Court of Justice, are in a parallel relationship. The Constitutional Court judges German constitutional law, and the Court of Justice in Europe judges the compatibility of ESM with European law. As a matter of fact, once the European Court of Justice has said that Ireland is or not entitled to ratify the EMS, then the German legislator and the German Constitutional Court will have to adjust this decision, or has to take that into account, because in the field of construing and interpreting and ruling European law, the European Court of Justice has an undisputed monopoly.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's rather what I thought. But getting back to the bones of the case, it seems to me that Germany has got itself, not by its own design, into an almost impossible, in fact it is an impossible position, because the cost of bailing out the other members of the eurozone who either have sought a bailout or are likely to seek a bailout is so enormous, it is too big for countries like Germany, Finland, Netherlands and Austria and Luxembourg to bear. And of course, Germany is a major component of this. And I just cannot see how this is possible without the ECB coming in and trying to find a way of providing the money without collapsing the euro. But then you've got another problem, and that is the relationship between where the Bundesbank and the ECB and where all that fits into it. This could get extremely messy, I would have thought.
Your arguments are full of rich ideas. Let me tackle them one by one. Anyway, I would only congratulate you for your common sense. We would need people like you in the German Bundestag. You would be a better representative of the German people. And you would certainly
I'm not a politician.
Not mislead the German nation as some politicians around for Merkel do. the suit which I have just lodged, or the complaint which I have just lodged in the name of about 20 businessmen and academics in Germany, is the first one. Really the first one that confronts the court with a quantified analysis of the overall consolidated financial burden for Germany if not there is an extremely bad scenario, but if we have a probably bad scenario. That is to say, today we know already the risk which we are exposed to. We have the IMF loans. Germany is exposed to that with 6%. We have the European Stability Mechanism of May and June 2011. Germany is exposed to that by 10%. We have the European Financial Stability Facility, which is it's a counterproductive incentive, because the one who gets a bailout, such as Greece, Portugal, and Ireland, they opt out. They automatically out of any liability. So there is an incentive to be bailed out, because then you have solved two problems at one stroke. You're no longer liable, and you get a lot of money. So Germany is no longer liable only for 27%. It's already liable for 29%, because the pro rata liability grows for the others as well, for Spain. Then we have to face up Spain and Cyprus. Imagine Cyprus. What have we got to do with the offshore bank in Cyprus? And this will add to the number of countries which will opt out, and the liability of Germany and the others will grow. So I have simply taken as an assumption that Slovakia and Slovenia, countries far poorer than Greece, will remain in, but Spain, Italy, and sooner or later France will request money. In that case, Germany faces up to an additional tax burden or financial burden, an overall of 1.7 trillion, which would add to the existing 2 trillion. That would certainly be unbearable. At least we would have to face a jump up of interest rate payments and an increased interest rate payments, not only in terms of quantity, but as well interest rates would certainly increase. We cannot, with total certainty, say how much the increase will be. I've made scenarios of a 1%, 2%, and 3% increase, but that would be in any case enough to let myself and my kids, of, let's say 2 generations, for the rest of their life, they would have to pay for the redemption of nations which have been profiting from these so-called stabilization mechanisms. So we have really come to a point where German fiscal democracy, Dutch fiscal democracy, Finnish fiscal democracy, not to forget about Austrian fiscal democracy, and perhaps Luxembourg fiscal democracy is squeezed out.
Yes, this is. There is another aspect of this which I just want a little clarification on. You've put in you've quantified the amount of the burden of debt that Germany is likely to face under reasonable circumstances. Possibly face, yeah. But this is it's a dynamic situation where which is deteriorating all the time, and the deterioration can be measured by the week virtually. So my question really is, does the Constitutional Court, in considering its judgment, look forward as well as just, if you like, pronouncing on the evidence that is put before it?
Don't expect too much of the law court, particularly not of the Constitutional Law Court. Constitutional Law Court is composed of academics, former professors of public law. They have many qualities, but not the quality of being familiar with the dynamics of financial public finance. That's why I confront them with a calculation, saying that, well, whatever happens, you should not be able to tell for the aftermath. Well, we did not know, because the other complainants, all of them are, or most of them are, either lawyers or as well professors of public law, don't like the calculations. I like the calculations. Nothing is self-explanatory as in numbers, figures. And even if one contests my figures, I made that demonstration, and I made that demonstration to confront the law court with a dimension of risk exposure. In the preceding case in September 2011, the Constitutional Court judged that a risk exposure of 170 billion does not lead to an unbearable financial burden. Well, and that they set aside the question: what is the border? What is the front line of sustainability for debt? Well, now we have 10 times more risk, according to me. Either they refute my numbers or they come to the conclusion, which is of all evidence, that no country which does not want to give up its fiscal sovereignty can accept such a risk exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now I understand that. Now
this is sound reasoning. This is even a child can understand that.
Well, even I can understand it. So, no, you're absolutely right. I think it's absolutely clear, and thank you very much for making that clear to us. If we think ahead a little bit, and after the September ruling, let us say that the Constitutional Court rules in your favour. What then happens, do you think, in the eurozone? Because this is a real spanner in the works for politicians.
A ruling in my favour would imply that the law court, the constitutional law court, first of all, hands over the case to the European law court and says, is the fiscal compact and is the ESM compatible with European law? We strongly argue it is not. Mr. Pringle in the Irish case does the same. He only attacks the ESM. We attack as well the fiscal compact because we don't see formally how the agreement of 25 nations out of 27 by a merely international treaty can change the European treaty. To change the European treaty, you need a modification or a revision procedure foreseen in the treaties. And they have not abided by that principle. On the contrary, they have made an agreement. You cannot change the treaty, authorizing the law court to do something what the treaty does not allow so far. And for the ESM, I've said the same. So the first courageous step I expect the Constitutional Court to do is to say, well, this is European law. This is not my competence. I have to ask the European Law Court. No constitutional law, no Supreme Court is extremely adamant to do so, because they get an answer back from the European Law Court and they can no longer dispute that answer, and they have to integrate that legal answer into their judgment, into their verdict. So this is the first thing. The second thing, if ever the Constitutional Court says, what quite honestly I hope, but I do not politically expect it, the President of the Republic can, for the time being, is not allowed to sign that law, so it doesn't become valid, then German party politics has a problem, because although the European Financial Stability Facility is still valid and goes on till June or July next year, well, there is a money problem, because Spain and Cyprus and Italy and perhaps France, they already queue up. So Germany's credibility, politically speaking, will suffer from that. So we will be in a legal mess and quite certainly in a political mess. And I could very well imagine that the law court says, well, honestly, too much is too much. That goes beyond what we can give clearance for. But if the German people want that, then ask the German people and go ahead with a referendum. And the political wisdom of or the tactics of the very weird Chancellor, Frau Merkel, will perhaps teach her, to go for a referendum quickly, even before the euro comes tumbling down. Because if she waits for the next general elections, I'm quite sure that the situation will have changed, and even those who are not authorized to vote, the children will have understood that the story of the euro is over.
Yes, it's bringing out things perhaps which politicians would rather the electorate not consider. But all this is just going to add not only complexity but also time in trying to find some sort of resolution in the sense of keeping the eurozone
together. Not only of
together.
keeping the eurozone together, but in keeping your pocket money together, because many investors with great legitimacy ask themselves the question, what is my strategy? How do I manage my assets? This is
Exactly.
a dramatic situation, and it lays bare that nobody is so powerful for the expropriation of citizens than the state by conducting a wrong fiscal and monetary policy. Let's take a look at the ECB. What ECB does comes very close to what I would call monetary crime or dismenine.
Yes. Misdemeanor, absolutely. You make an interesting point about people's monetary interests in this. We're already seeing some reports, I don't know whether they're true, of major corporations like Shell, and I think I saw AIG the other day, either withholding investment from the eurozone area or indeed repatriating what money they can from that area, because they obviously take the view that this is something which cannot be solved within a time frame which allows such problems to be solved. And this, I would have thought, is an enormous worry to the German politicians.
That is certainly an enormous problem, but politicians only exceptionally understand the complexity of monetary problems and the complexity of, let's say, treasurers within international corporations. I think we need the contrary of what is called a breakup, because even the gossip about a breakup stirs up the markets and leads to movements of capital such as the ones you've just mentioned. Because what happened in Greece, with a lot of Greek capital moving out and bringing the euro accounts to safe haven banks, could as well happen to all the eurozone if Germany does not use its leadership or doesn't reinvent its leadership. So that is why I've proposed a plan for an evolutionary dismantling of the eurozone. I would like to bring the debate to an end whether the euro is the utmost of all, so to say, the religious, metaphysical aim of European policy, or whether it's the invention of the devil. I'm a pragmatic. I say let's leave it at that. Whatever you think about it, whatever you think about the project, instead of hope, let's look at experience. And the experience over the last 10 years has proved it has not worked. It cannot work. And it will never work, however great the firewalls will be. So let's come to an end. Let's come to a soft landing. My proposal is, instead of abolishing all that, instead of doing what certain members of the British Upper House have proposed, we should have an evolutionary attitude and create, alongside to the euro, a parallel currency, which I have baptized the Guldenmark, trying to make a combination of the Gilde and the Deutschmark, because the Netherlands and Germany and Finland and Austria and Luxembourg and perhaps in the midterm one Mediterranean country should be founding members of that zone. And they should keep the euro parallelly as a legal tender, and then let citizens and the corporations choose. You can only avoid capital flight or exodus of capital if you enlarge the list of choices of options. And I want to enlarge that list of options, of monetary options, giving alongside to a euro, which will be a weak currency, a soft currency, if Mr. Draghi continues, and Mr. Curé continues to manage the currency as they do. Let's give alongside to the euro the citizens and the corporations of the above-mentioned countries the option of a hard currency. And then we will keep all the euro debt and claims in euro, denominated for the past, and for the future, people are free to choose.
Right. I
have put this down into a book which is called Daring More Competition, More Monetary Competition, and I would be happy to send this to you if ever you're interested.
I would be very interested. And can our listeners buy this through Amazon?
Yes, they can buy this. This is a scientific publisher who's called Lucius and Lucius, but I will send you a flyer, and it is available at rates which are, I would say, called humane. It's written in an essay-like style. I've made it in German and English, because to be known in the English-speaking world, you have to write, fortunately enough, in English. And I have kept another 50% for myself. And I pay tribute in that little booklet to an economist who's perhaps the most misunderstood and misinterpreted economist of our time, John Maynard Keynes, who, in his analysis of the Versailles peace treaty, taught us how the wrong handling of an economic matter, by politicians might lead to an outburst of political flames. And as we have had this 2 times in the 20th centuries, I think we should watch out that the euro, although apparently a failing economic project, should not become the source of political aggression and political confrontation.
Yes, well, that's very interesting. What I would like to do when I get that information on your book for you is we'll put it on our website so that any listeners to this who are interested,
and I would be happy to know their opinion, and I pay tribute to, with great respect to their critical comments, and everybody who gives me his comments will receive an answer. Because the reader is always right.
Exactly. Unlike, it's a refreshing approach compared to that of the politicians, who I think try and lead their electorates.
It is a proposal which is extremely moderate. It is perhaps original in its approach, but it's moderate, and it's a historical compromise. I'm not a revolutionary. I'm not a counter-revolutionary. I'm just a radical, pragmatical man who sees the situation. And I think today we are in great lack of politicians who have the responsibility and the character to say, well, let's see, the show is over. I always compare this to even more severe situations, like in 62, when after 32 years of French presence in Algeria is part of the French territory, General de Gaulle said, well, it's over. Yeah, we have to get rid of that problem as quickly as possible. And this was a very, very, very difficult lesson to teach the French. And he assumed this responsibility, and he was, as you know, was given not a warm welcome, and he had to fight with some parachutists in Paris.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed for taking time out at what is a very, very busy time for you.
It is
this challenge coming up.
Pleasure to talk to you, and it is a great challenge for me to explain in humble words all these complex ideas.
Well, we are very, very grateful, Professor Kerber, and thank you very much indeed, and I wish you every success with it. The fight to ensure that the law is obeyed and that some sensible pragmatism comes into the equation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.